Hello everyone. This is a short presentation on the history and definitions of popular tabletop role-playing games. It was created in 2019 for the online course Operations of Tabletop Role-Playing Games as Social Emotional Learning Tools for Educators. In this video, I hope to go through some of the common terms of tabletop role-playing games, as well as give an overall definition for those of us who might not know what TTRPGs are. So if you're looking to learn more about them, here's a short video sourced from a lot of different sources and pieced together based on my experience with tabletop role-playing games as well. So tabletop role-playing games, to define them, is a creative game. It's a game of collaborative storytelling in which the player characters or the players of the game create a story with the dungeon master or the game master of the game, who sort of rules over everything and makes sure that everyone is following the system of rules that is created. In a tabletop role-playing game, the setting of the game can be anything within the realm of your imagination. This includes, but doesn't limit you to, of course, medieval fantasy settings such as Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinder, but also the realms of already written fiction such as Star Wars, Harry Potter, Avatar: The Last Airbender. In these games, tabletop role-playing games, characters are created by the players. They are not already dictated unless so set by the dungeon master or the game master, and they follow a variety of systems of rules. So a gaming system sort of gives a broader setting and a broader rule system to the game to guide players and their game master or their dungeon master through the game itself, since it is based a lot on collaborative storytelling, imagination, and generally speaking, all players involved, including the dungeon master or game master, are making this up as they go along. So it kind of holds and cements the whole game together. Some examples of common systems of rules include Dungeons and Dragons, Pathfinder, Fate, and Savage Worlds. These are just some systems of rules that are common in the TTRPG world. One of the most common is Dungeons and Dragons. It has been around for years and years, and is very common, and there are a lot of resources that you can find out there. The rules of these RPGs for all of those systems have evolved multiple times. Like I've said, Dungeons and Dragons has come a long way over the decades that it has been created and then adapted and edited and revised. The rules can be very dense, and your game master or your dungeon master can follow very closely to them, or they can be very light and in general just sort of have an idea of just imaginative play. A lot of the possibilities in role-playing games that have light rules are endless in terms of your imagination. The ones with more dense rules are more realistic and follow the real world. The rules of these RPGs are commonly found in a handbook, whether that be a physical handbook or a PDF online, or just scripted by your dungeon master, created by them, so in a word processing document. In an RPG, a lot of the outcomes of the decisions of players are put up to fate by dice rolling. Dice rolling and chance play a large part of RPG rules, and a few examples are listed over on the side on the left there, and then a set of common die, is on the right. Starting on the top left for those die, you have a D100, which means a dice with 100 possibilities. You take the tens place here. Next is a D10, which means it goes up to the number 10. It has 10 sides. Next is a D12. A D12 has 12 sides. And next is a d20. A d20 has 20 sides. On the bottom of this, starting on the left, is a d4. There's 4 sides and 4 possibilities, each located on the corners of the triangular faces. Next is a d6, the common gaming die. It has 6 sides. And then is a d8, 8 sides. The dice rolling and chance is created by both the player as well as the dungeon master or the game master. So, for example, in a storytelling setting, the game master might describe a scenario in which the players come across a shopkeeper with a letter of importance. The letter might dictate something that the player characters need to do next. It might be a love letter from one of the player characters' crushes in game, anything along those lines. The player character wants to retrieve the letter, but does not want to fight the shopkeeper. They would say, so my character really wants to take that letter from the shopkeeper. However, I don't feel like I'm physically capable of punching it out of him. Game master, is there any way that I could possibly charm him out of that letter by maybe talking about how cool his shirt looks today? Or I could notice something about his hair. The game master would then reply that they needed to roll a certain kind of die. Usually in this sort of situation, it would be a d20, which is the standard die, and then add the modifiers that are located on the left side of this slide in the different categories of characteristics, of character skills: strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, or charisma. Charisma is what the player is going for here, trying to charm the shopkeeper out of the letter itself. They would roll the d20, add their charisma modifier, which is a smaller number based on how the character was created, and then the outcome would be determined. Usually, in this sort of situation, dice rolls that are low mean that the outcome of the decision is not favorable. Dice rolls that are high mean that the outcome of the decision is favorable. Usually things go the way the player character wanted them to go. However, all of this is left up to the dungeon master or the game master, who ultimately decides the plot. Next is a small terms list of common terms you'll hear when playing TTRPGs. I'll run through them really quick, but you can also read, so I won't elaborate on things that don't need to be elaborated on. Starting on the top, on the left side, the DM or GM is the dungeon master or the game master. This is the person that controls the story, knows the plot, and leads characters through the storytelling process based on the system that the characters are playing in. The PC is the player character. This is someone who is actively involved in the game, playing it through the eyes of a character. The NPC is a non-player character. Usually these characters are played by the dungeon master or the game master. A DC is a difficulty check. When a player character or a PC decides to try to undergo a difficult decision or a outcome where something might not be favorable, the DM or the GM will set a DC for the task. For example, when Jean Valjean in Les Miserables lifts one of the carts off of the man in the alley, he had a lot of strength and a lot of mental strength as well. If I were the DM or the GM in that situation, when he rolled for his lifting of the cart, his heroic action, I would set the DC pretty low. I would say it would be a DC of 15, which means he would need to either meet or succeed above 15 on his dice roll plus his character skill modifier. The DC is usually not announced to the player character, but rather the DM or the GM just keeps it in mind as the player tells them the dice roll. Next is HP, which is hit points or health points. This is how much constitution or health a player character has. It is helpful in combat when characters need to fight things to know how healthy they are. The class of a character is the job or role a character has. In a TTRPG, usually this involves different constructs of magic ability or fighting ability. For example, fighters and rangers as classes are more adept at physical skills, acrobatic skills. They're able to wield weapons more proficiently. However, a bard or a wizard is more adept at casting magical spells. These classes vary, however, depending on the system of TTRPG you're playing. The race is the physical appearance or the history of the character. Much like the race of humans, races in TTRPGs can be fantasy, but they can also be very realistic. The race of the character is based on their origin and usually dictates what sort of physical characteristics or traits the character will have. Over on the right-hand side, metagame is when players use their personal knowledge to influence their character's choice. As part of a TTRPG, you're constantly learning information about the world that is being created by you and your dungeon master. However, if your character is not present for certain events, you learn information personally as the player that may influence your character choices. Metagaming is generally frowned upon in the TTRPG community because since it is all about role-playing as the character that you're playing as, you shouldn't be influenced by that knowledge. A D, and then number, is a dice with a certain number of sides. For example, a D8 is an 8-sided die, a D6 is a 6-sided die, and a D20 is a 20-sided die. Natural 1 or natural 20 is the lowest or highest roll on the common D20, which normally determines the outcome of a task. The map is the physical setting for the players of the game. It can be 2-dimensional or 3-dimensional, and it shows players where their characters are in the location of the fantasy world. Character creation. Once the system has been chosen, players will need to create characters. For example, on the right-hand side, this image shows a small character creation, easy-to-learn, step-by-step guide that helps you create a character in the Dungeons & Dragons system. For game creation, pre-made modules can be found online by searching for systems you'd like to play, or in books of campaign settings. Or a DM or GM can choose to create their own game. Following the following constructs over on the right-hand side can help you create a game that is realistic and that holds weight with your players. If you have any other questions, feel free to email me at jwilson6@albany.edu. Additionally, you can search the web to find out more about TTRPGs by simply doing a search for such. I hope you have a wonderful day, and thank you for listening.